Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we investigate reports relating to firefighter line of duty deaths to hopefully learn from them and prevent them from occurring again. This week's episode is number 73, and it's a double line of duty death drowning that occurred in a small village or paroisse in Saint-Urbain, Quebec, in June of 2023. This week, my great co-host, Denis, is joining me. Denis and I worked hard to translate the French coroner's report into a usable script, so hopefully it will be acceptable for this podcast anyway. We struggle with scripts in Canada because there is no line of duty investigation system like they have in the States or in other countries, so we have to go by media reports or coroner's reports, which we've done before for various Canadian episodes, such as Listowel, Ontario, and Yellowknife, and St. Thomas, Ontario, and some of the others that we've done on this. And the one of the second or third episode I did was the mine in Kimberley, BC. Anyway, so we worked hard to get this out there. We think it's important to firefighters who end up going and doing water rescues, sometimes inadequately equipped or trained. And so here we are. Sorry, Denis, I just kind of rambled on there, but hi, how you doing?
I'm just amused that you're admitting to rambling on when you're the one that accuses me of going down rabbit holes. But that's good. I'm good, Paul. I'm better now that you rambled on. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah. How's the weather in Nova Scotia?
It's wonderful, Waldorf. It's quite nice. Thank you.
Yes. Good. Yeah. It's spring weather in Alberta, so you never know. It changes every few hours, but otherwise
we're having a black fly epidemic this year. They're really bad.
That's crazy. Oh,
if you were to stand still outside for an hour, you'd come in looking like hamburger.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Yeah, that is terrible. Well, we don't have too many bugs here yet, but I'm sure they're coming. It was really dry here, so we're appreciating the moisture, right? Been getting lots of wildfires. Alberta had them, Saskatchewan had them, Manitoba's got them, Ontario's got them. Yeah. Huge wildfires. 20-some cabins burnt in Manitoba at a resort community.
Lac La Bonnette.
Yeah, Lac La Bonnette and Dubonnet. Yep, and
Dubonnet, yeah.
So I was actually teaching at the fire school in Vermilion. I was teaching pump. I taught aerial a week, and I was teaching pump. And the second day, they took my students away, and they took them to Sturgeon County to fight the Redwater fire. And they gave me another class of brand new people that had just started 2 weeks in. And I ended up teaching basic firefighting stuff like ladders and rescues and forcible entry and searches and that, which of course I haven't done forever. So I had
hear the rusty gears turning.
I'll follow. I told the instructor, I'll follow along. You lead, because I always had firefighters that did basic stuff. I only do the more advanced stuff, if you will, or whatever. But anyway, it was good.
Yes.
So
killed a few brain cells. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, we definitely did. I definitely did kill some brain cells, but it was fun. It was good. Yeah, it was pretty stiff and sore every night after working out on the training grounds today, and burnt my nose, of course, from the sun. Anyway.
Yeah. Horrors.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Dirk and Doug are busy. I think Dirk's got his in-laws staying with him, and Doug is busy with, of course, life, 3 kids and a dog and work, and they're both working and on and on. So anyway, it's you and I. So I had to squeeze this in when I was home between camping trips and teaching and whatever else. So today's the day.
Wonderful.
So I have the FDNY tips. We've been started doing this year, this tips book that FDNY did. And by all means, if you're interested, please look it up and print some of these tips off and share it with your crew. It's a great little quick training resource. This one here, tip number 15, is all about rehabilitated buildings, which we're starting to see more and more now, as either their cost of building is so expensive, they're rehabilitated, such as malls or schools, into other purposes. Even Calgary for a while was talking about changing a bunch of business occupancies into residential. Um, we're getting the secondary suites, or the suite over a garage. Calgary's on a big push right now to increase density, and therefore they're building extra homes, or they're modifying homes for more suites and stuff like that. So we're seeing the rehabilitated buildings.
The positive side of that, Paul, is a lot of people who had second dwellings in their homes. They were illegal. They weren't supposed to be there. And so people didn't know, firefighters wouldn't know necessarily that there was a second dwelling. So now that a lot of the regulations have changed and they're allowing those secondary suites, at least that should improve firefighters' ability to recognize these things, to know that they're actually there, if you
Yeah,
take the effort in your community to identify those places.
that's the problem. Well, I just saw a post on Rick DeGroot's Facebook page there, building construction for the fire service, and he showed a picture of a two-car garage in a backyard of a home, and it had a suite, an unheated suite on the second floor. Which, there was the only way to know there was a suite up there is there was a window, and you don't know they're there. Anyway, this tip goes on about. It has a picture in the tip of C joists, metal C joists, the floor joists, added to the floor in a non-fireproof building, which ended up with a real severe collapse potential. The median age of residential buildings in New York City, which is where these are from, is about 90 years old. This is largely due to the 63% population growth between 1900 and 1920, which we're seeing again now in many areas from immigration and stuff like that. Construction boom during that era. Many of these buildings have been significantly rehabilitated over time. Many of the renovations have occurred in non-fireproof multiple family dwellings. This has created challenges and dangers during fire operations. Here are a few of the many renovations that may affect fire operations. Lightweight building materials, and you get that where you see an old traditionally built building with stick lumber, floor joists, all that kind of stuff, and then the one beside it, or the renovation inside it, has silent floor systems, floor trusses, lightweight construction. It talks here, the addition of lightweight materials in a non-fireproof building is one of the most dangerous renovations. Contractors may choose to salvage the existing structural framework, or just replace damaged wood joists with either C joists or lightweight wood I-beams. These modern building materials can fail within 5 to 10 minutes of fire exposures, as we know. Combined buildings. Several buildings may be combined into one larger building. Most of the original entrances will be bricked over, converted to windows, or have a door that does not have access into the building. We saw that in that one fire where the guys were on the second floor. They went up the back stairs above a store or retail, and they got lost, and there was a wall in between. They couldn't even reach them from the Charlie side windows. Long hallways, main entrance may be remote from the fire department, necessitating long hose stretches. Painted fire escapes. Although a fire escape may look like it was just installed, it's probably just painted. Some of these have been attached to the building since it was constructed. They may not have been properly maintained. When climbing a fire escape, always place your feet towards the insides of the step to reduce stress on the connection between the tread and the stringer, and never lean on railings. Drop ceilings. Oh, my favorite. Drop ceilings may not be obvious when entering an apartment. In a renovated building, there's a good chance the original ceiling was left in place and a new ceiling built underneath it, creating a mini cockloft on each floor. These void spaces may spread over adjoining apartments on the same floor.
Know your buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I brought some of this stuff up when I was teaching in Vermilion there to these new firefighting students, and I mean, they didn't have a clue what a cockloft was, or all these different things in the fire service that we need to learn. You got to study the material.
Yeah, if you're a firefighter in a community, particularly a community that's got older buildings, and you're driving along and you see the dumpster outside the building, doesn't matter what you know, go inside and find out what you should know,
Yep,
because
exactly.
I think
Good
you'll
advice.
be surprised.
Good
Yeah,
advice.
we
He will be surprised. Yep.
oh definitely. And in fact, I'm thinking of a new building that was a seniors building, and it was built in a community where I was the fire chief, and it was all timber and a lot of glulam and wood eyes and stuff like that. But the buildings were built in like a hexagonal shape, and they fit together. And you went in and looked at how the structures went, and you could clearly see that one area of the building there were connections to other areas of the building would have been above the ceiling just because of the way the beams and joists sat. There was openings that you really couldn't close up or wouldn't have closed up, and so it was possible for fire to spread through these. Yeah, I wouldn't call them cocklofts necessarily, but these void spaces that transmitted themselves across the ceiling. And so, this is something you make a note of, right, when you're doing that, because someday there will be a fire there. It's almost inevitable, and you want to be prepared.
And this
Problem
isn't.
is it may outlive your memory, so write it down in a
Yeah,
pre-plan.
this isn't new. I mean, we did that from the last century episode with Chief Graham or Routley, and it was in the 70s, and they had some building. They built over the street that used to be there and attached the front of the building to the back to make it bigger, right? So it's not new. But anyway, yeah, know your hood. Keeps coming. Brannigan, know your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
This week was a pretty tragic week when it talks about line of duty deaths, or last week was. Baltimore lost 2 firefighters to medical emergencies in 1 week. The one firefighter was climbing a ladder and had a medical emergency and fell off the ladder on an aerial truck, I believe. And the other medical was during training evolutions, and they had a medical episode and passed away. 2 firefighters, of course, passed away in the UK, in Oxfordshire, I believe. It was an old World War II hangar that was converted into a vintage automobile restoration shop, and it caught fire. And Denis, you had a little more information on maybe what happened there?
Well, it was just I was reading some comments in a post on Facebook, and it was one of those Facebook groups that tries to keep track of stuff that's going on. And there was a guy from the UK said that he had some insider information that the large sliding doors had detached from the building and collapsed onto the firefighters. And if you
Like
actually see the post, if you actually see the post fire photos and videos, you can see that those doors are lying full length out into the yard in front. So you could see where there was a pretty significant collapse zone at the front of the building, where it would have been logical to move vehicles and machinery and materials in and out of that building. So those doors were likely in use. And so it would have been a logical place to pull up with a fire truck and advance lines for a fire inside the building. But in fact, it was a collapse zone, and not like a collapse zone you'd have with like a masonry facade where you might have some of it go in, some of it come out. This was a collapse zone where you absolutely wanted to be 100% of the height of the building away from the building, because if those doors came down, and it looks like they did come down, and this comment suggested that that's what impacted the firefighters was these doors, and
these are
they were steel, they weighed tons.
these are accordion style doors, right? They open like an accordion,
No,
right and
no,
left.
slab doors.
Oh, they slide behind each other. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no, just one goes left, one goes right. They're on big rails.
Oh, okay, and they're one big one piece door. Two of
Yeah,
them. Wow.
all
Yeah.
steel, all steel.
Yeah.
So it looks like the structure that held the doors to the building became detached from the building,
Right.
and
Burned
then
through.
they
Yeah.
they would have dropped onto the ground and fell outwards.
Then fell
That's
out.
what it looks like. Certainly, that's the position they're in post fire. So,
And there's been a
um,
lot of old hangar fires. I've been posting about it here and there on socials and stuff like that. It's a pet peeve of mine. And on LinkedIn, there's been a lot.
yeah,
There was one in Happy Valley Goose
Gander,
Bay a year
yeah,
ago, or Gander. There was one
yeah,
in
Happy
Edmonton.
Valley, yeah,
There was one in Edmonton. They couldn't access the one side of the building with fire trucks because it was all soft ground from renovations or from earthwork. There was one in California, the Toshigo or something, the old blimp air base that burned, and there was complaints for years that the buildings weren't maintained, the water pressure systems, the sprinkler systems weren't maintained, and you end up with this huge lumber yard. So these old hangars are a threat. I attended a hangar fire in Saskatoon many years ago at the airport, and it was an old hangar, and they had to the fire. They went in the building. The fire trucks drove inside the hangar. It's huge, right? Because it was It was a fire in the mechanical or business space at the back, and they ended up evacuating and pulling the trucks out and the hoses. They lost all their hoses and everything. Guys just ran, and I remember attending the fire. Anyway, there was a line of duty death due to the tornado in Kentucky. So there was a huge tornadoes this week, 20 people dead almost, I think, vast tornadoes across the United States. And a firefighter, a major, was responding from his home to the call, and the tornado got him and killed him before he even got to the call. So terrible. There was a fire yesterday. Kumho Tires, a huge tire manufacturer in Korea, South Korea, had a fire at the factory, and over 100 fire apparatus on scene apparently yesterday, trying to fight this massive fire in a factory. And there are no word on injuries and stuff like that. The good thing though is that the NIOSH firefighter prevention program, which we get a lot of reports from, line of duty deaths, is back. It's been refunded and it's opening up, and they're publishing reports, and so it's been brought back from some cuts where it was all cut down, and they let bunch of people go a couple months ago. So we're glad to see NIOSH is back, so we can learn from these fatal mistakes. Unfortunately,
Yeah, hopefully
in Canada,
they get back in there. Yeah, hopefully they get back in stride pretty soon.
right, and unfortunately in Canada we don't have such a program, which is why we struggle to bring you information about Canadian firefighter fatalities.
Yeah, and we say again, if you're in any position to do something about that, do something about that.
Yeah, for sure.
We complain about it, but we're not really the doers.
No, we're just the Waldorf and Statler show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although we can be funny, just saying.
Aha. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this incident that happened in Quebec, and again, I would remind you that the information in this mostly comes from a coroner's report, so it doesn't really have any insight from a firefighter's perspective. So we don't really know what some of the thinking that was going on. We only know what came out in the coroner's report from facts, and quite a lot of the information is from experts who were referenced in the coroner's jury when they were doing this inquest. So tends to be one-sided from that point of view. So I warn you about this. So the episode is about a June 2023 incident. So quite recent, right? So just 2 years ago now, where there were two volunteer firefighters. The first firefighter was Régis Lavoie, and another firefighter called Christophe Lavoie, and they were not related to each other, even though they have the same last name. If they were related, it was generations ago. Anyway, they lived in the small parish of Saint-Urbain, Urbain for our non-French speakers, which is in the Charlevoix region of the province of Quebec, so on the north shore of the Saguenay River. The Saint-Laurent River. And they were drowned while attempting to perform a rescue operation that occurred during a local flood that was caused by heavy rainfall and snow melt. In June, there's still snow on the mountains north of there, which had flooded the rivers that swept through this rural community. The information from this episode is summarized primarily from the provincial coroner's report that was held by André Kronstrom was the coroner. Some important comments from the coroner regarding this tragic incident are worth repeating here, and they're kind of a summary comment, and I quote, "Many factors at the root of this unfortunate incident of the two firefighters' deaths resulted from a chain of events that are not solely due to the fact that the firefighters used an amphibious vehicle to attempt a rescue in a field submerged with more than 1.2 meters of fast-flowing water at a risk to their own safety." So yes, that was the proximal cause of their death, but there were more reasons that led up to that event that caused their deaths, is what the coroner is saying.
Yeah, the thing I found interesting in this coroner's report, as you may know, I'm an emergency manager. I teach emergency management for NAIT, which is a college out here in Alberta. And the coroner found numerous emergency management gaps that were critical factors leading up to this incident, such as pre-planning, notification and watching of floodwaters, how they notify the people, having training and equipment, and a coordinated response. I think it comes up later. I can't remember, but the coroner found that the municipality failed to observe or check many of the warnings the province had issued for this before it happened, and many of the senior personnel in the municipality had no awareness of the emergency plans for the community. So they found that to be lacking, and so that's something that really drove home with me is like, wow, these guys weren't ready for this in many ways.
Yeah, so the takeaway from that is, and it's something you can probably identify with yourself, is that the fire department is not always in control of all of the factors that lead up to their need to respond to an incident. In many cases, it's the municipality. In some cases, it's the public themselves who are in control of some of those factors, levels of preparedness, levels of planning, and so forth. But as a fire department, you're the guy at the other end of the phone when the 911 is made and have to respond. So it's important as a fire department to recognize, I think, that the municipality itself is prepared or isn't prepared, and adjust your tactics and your equipment and your training accordingly.
So the fire department, in particular, this municipality, Saint-Urbain, small rural parish near the north shore of the St. Lawrence River, as Denis mentioned. It's about an hour northeast of the provincial capital, Quebec City. The population of the village is just under 1,400 residents at the time. The parish was established long ago in 1827. The nearest larger urban center is Bay St. Paul, which many Canadians have heard about on the St. Lawrence River, and it's about 15 minutes away, so it's not that far. Bay St. Paul is a town of about 7,300 residents right on the shore, or just off the shore of the St. Lawrence River. The fire department of Saint-Urbain consisted of a fire chief, who's also a parish public works employee, 2 officers, 13 firefighters, and 1 probationary firefighter. They're all volunteer, or sometimes referred to in Canada as part-time on call. So your typical 1,400, the first town I was in on the fire department, Dalmeny, Saskatchewan, and that's exactly what we had, basically. Very, very similar situation.
So the two victims involved in this, it's confusing because they have the same last name, but the victims in this incident were Regis Lavoie, who we're going to call throughout this narrative as the senior firefighter, and he had 15 years and on the department, and his partner who drowned in this incident was a guy by the name of Christopher Lavoie, or Christophe Lavoie, and we're going to call him the probationary firefighter. He was not beyond his probationary year. He had only attended the provincial firefighting school. We'll talk a little bit about training, but and he did attend callouts, but he did not participate in on-scene activities except as an observer due to his probationary status. So he'd go to calls, but basically stayed out of the action. Essentially, is what that
Watch,
says.
help out, maybe grab a tool, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to do
The
some
weather.
editing there, Paul, because I kind of lost
Yeah,
track of where it was.
that's okay. Yep, I'll do that. That's easy. The weather on April 28th, 2023. The Federal Weather Service had announced a major low-pressure system forecast to affect the region on Tuesday, May 2nd. Periods of heavy rain were expected on Monday, May 1st, which we just had here in Alberta. We had 3 inches of rain on last Monday. Luckily, it was over a long period of time, and the soil was very dry, so it soaked it up. Anyway, they were supposed to get 60 to 70 millimeters, so 2.5 to 3 inches of rain in 24 hours. The parish was preparing for heavy rainfall. There's a note here, though, that testimony during the inquiries shows discrepancies regarding that the weather and river flow monitoring, or lack thereof, by municipal officials and staff. So they really weren't thinking about this emergency that was pending to come. And some of us, like myself, were much more emergency manager situation aware. I'm always watching for all this kind of stuff ahead of time, and maybe I worry about it too much. But apparently, the municipality wasn't really concerned about this, and they didn't have any preparations ongoing for a big weather event. Denis had to step away for a moment here due to a in-home emergency, so he's going to deal with that. The incident on the morning of May 1st, a few municipal staff were monitoring actual water levels at a few spots in the nearby Gaufrey River that runs through the community. At 11:30, a local resident called 911 needing rescue from the localized flooding. The phone call prompted a call out for the fire department volunteers. The fire chief, the mayor, and also the nearby mutual aid fire department, the bigger town of Bay St. Paul, also were notified by dispatch of this call. 9 Saint-Urbain firefighters responded to the call-out. 5 went to the fire station, and 3 indicated available if needed on their electronic notification system. So that would be something like active 911 or I am responding or something like that. 1 other firefighter indicated they were unable to respond. 5 firefighters went to the station and donned their bunker gear and headed out to evacuate and or encourage residents in flood danger areas to evacuate with door-to-door contact. During this local emergency, an incident command post or emergency coordination center was not established. So this is kind of a miss in the emergency planning, if you will. If we're getting heavy rain and flooding, or we're getting calls of people threatening, we're evacuating people, we need to set up a command post or an emergency coordination center to make sure we manage things properly. Basic incident emergency management. Also, during this local emergency, another call came in to a member of the fire department personally regarding a couple of residents that were needing rescue from their flooded home, which had access to the road was blocked by flood waters. The firefighters discussed the situation and came up with the idea of using a private amphibious vehicle to access the trapped vehicles. So this amphibious vehicle, I don't want to use, fault the brand name or anything, but this is, if you're familiar with an Argo, which is a 6 or 8 wheeled all-terrain vehicle that also floats. And so I've used them in the past, and they're wonderful for crossing rivers and swampy areas and stuff like that. And they will run year round. You can put tracks on them and stuff like that, and they're great for hunting or exploring in the bush. The senior firefighter went from the fire station to his home to get his amphibious vehicle, while the probationary firefighter accompanied him. En route to his home, the senior firefighter realized that his amphibious vehicle was not usable because it still had a snowplow attachment on the front, and therefore he couldn't use it, and it would take a while to get it off. However, his sister had a similar vehicle, and that vehicle was already loaded on a trailer, so they drove to his sister's home. There was another firefighter that was planning to assist the senior firefighter in these operations, but his truck got stuck and his vehicle was delayed. His response was delayed because he got stuck in the mud because it's raining. Upon arrival at his sister's home, the senior firefighter hitched up the trailer and grabbed some life jackets. He also grabbed a 4-horsepower outboard motor, which was stored at his sister's house. The inquiry noted that the senior firefighter decided to take the outboard motor after he received a telephone call with a friend informing him that the amphibious vehicle that still had tracks on the wheels, it loses its water propulsion effectiveness because of the tracks. So they just normally the tires just paddle along, and that's how it moves. But because the tracks are on there, it does not propel itself very well. Upon arrival at the scene of the needed rescue near the home of the trapped residents, the senior firefighter was instructed by a nearby resident that he should proceed across the flooded field via circuitous route, which was shallower water. But the senior firefighter decided instead to use a ramp that he brought and proceeded directly across the flooded, now fast-flowing field to reach the trapped residents, rather than going around the tree line where it's shallower. After launching the vehicle, the senior firefighter sat in the rear of the vehicle to operate the outboard motor and instructed the probationary firefighter to sit in the front to balance the weight in the vehicle while it was on the water. After traversing approximately half the distance across the flooded field to the target home, where the people were needing to be rescued, the amphibious vehicle began to drift backwards. The senior firefighter lifted the outboard motor to check on its operation. They wanted to know why it couldn't keep up with the flow. A third firefighter, who had originally planned to respond with the amphibious vehicle, then arrived on the scene after getting his truck unstuck from the mud. He arrived just in time to see the struggling amphibious vehicle drifting backwards. The inquiry did find this firefighter's testimony contradictory. It was just a note that they had in the inquiry. The third firefighter stated that he tried to phone the senior firefighter unsuccessfully, but he did not attempt to contact him on the fire department radio, which people were kind of wondering why. This third firefighter then saw that the amphibious vehicle was drifting backwards towards a nearby bridge. The whole community is in a bit of a valley with a river that runs through it. Canada, especially Quebec, has thousands of these communities that are built up along the river's edge because that was the method of travel years ago. And the community sprouted up, and it's a shallow little valley with acreages all along and a road eventually. Anyway, so that's what happened is the river floods and the community floods. The firefighter quickly drove to the bridge and activated his vehicle emergency lights to try and attract the attention of the firefighters in the all-terrain vehicle. The third firefighter saw the senior firefighter and the probationary firefighter fall into the water and be swept away by the strong current as the amphibious vehicle struck the bridge. Another 911 call came in then from a witness who also saw saw somebody threaded under the bridge or went through the water under the bridge because it's probably flooded right to the underneath of the bridge. The third firefighter then directly called the fire chief of the nearby Bay St. Paul Fire Department for assistance. But due to the extreme rain and flooding conditions, Bay St. Paul were unable to render immediate mutual aid assistance. The chief emphasized the importance of keeping everybody away from the waterways due to the unusual flooding that they were experiencing. The original resident couple were still trapped in their home. They called 911 again, seeking rescue. The 911 center was notified that the two firefighters had fallen into the floodwaters and were also now needing rescue themselves. Moving into the rescue and recovery phase, to centralize the rescue efforts, a regional coordination center was established in Bay St. Paul. At approximately 17:35 hours, so this is quite a few hours, in the afternoon, the original couple who were trapped in their home were rescued via a Quebec provincial police helicopter. Ground and air searches were immediately started to locate and rescue the senior firefighter and the probationary firefighter. At the time, on-water searches were not possible due to the flooding conditions in the Gaufre River. The current in the river was estimated at 10 knots or 18 kilometers per hour, presenting a grim chance of rescuing the two firefighters. The rescue evolved into a recovery operation with resources contributed from the provincial police, the military, and the Canadian Coast Guard. On May 2nd, the day after the loss of the firefighters, the river lowered enough from its flood to allow on-water searches to commence. The following day, in the morning, the Marine Search Rescue teams recovered the body of the senior firefighters about 580 meters downstream from where he had fallen into the river. He was found partially buried in the mud and branches on a small island in the center of the river. He was still wearing his fire boots and bunker gear, but was not wearing a personal flotation device or PFD. Later that same day, at 13:15 hours, a police helicopter crew spotted a reflective stripe that they believed to be part of a bunker gear suit worn by probationary firefighter. Marine searchers then found the probationary firefighter another 560 meters further downstream, trapped in a pile of branches and an ice floe. The probationary firefighter, was still wearing his bunker gear, but he had no boots on or a personal flotation device. Note here states that he was found more than a kilometer from where he went into the water. On May 22nd, 3 weeks later, the amphibious vehicle was found on a riverbank near where the bodies were found, and a month after that, in June, the outboard motor was eventually found also. And he's back.
So there were some. Yeah.
Solved.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not resolved, but we'll resolve that later.
Cool. Not lost stop.
Right. Lost stopped. So a few notes from the coroner's findings, and these are pretty brief. There's not much detail to them, but we'll try and flesh them out a little bit, using our insight and experiences. So from the coroner's findings, the causes of deaths were determined to be drownings. And there was also some trauma to the head trauma, which may or may not have been part of the cause of death. I guess unknown whether they were pre or post death. Anyway, the coroner found that many factors led to the deaths of these firefighters, which we had alluded to earlier, and they noted the following ones: lack of known emergency plans. So these are really pointing to the municipality, I think, and the municipality being prepared to respond to emergencies, which all kinds of things such as notification, measuring, anticipation, mitigation, all these basic aspects of emergency preparedness. A lack of emergency management training. Another one here is inadequate emergency resource deployment. construction of residences in a flood zone, which is a massive problem
Well, and this actually, and we didn't get into it in the script.
everywhere.
The house that where the people were trapped was a summer cottage, and they were going to renovate the summer college cottage. They found that the cottage wasn't in renovatable condition, so they rebuilt it as a home. And because it had been there before, it got grandfathered through, even though it was in a flood zone where it shouldn't have been built. And Quebec actually has gone ahead more than many of the provinces in Canada with once they've paid for a house in a flood zone because it got flooded out, they will not allow you to build there again, or they'll pay one more time, and after that, you're on your own. So they are trying to prevent people from building in flood zones. And the government of Canada actually has produced new flood zone maps for every province to try to get away from this, because this is a huge problem, obviously. And so that's what they're saying here in the coroner's finding is, why did they allow residences in a flood zone and inadequate emergency resource deployment? They should have been prepared for this. They should have been pre-deployed. They should have had a command post, all these kind of things so that they could deal with an emergency. My motto as a fire chief, while I was fire chief, anytime I put our rescue boat in the water, I wanted to call another rescue boat. Because if it's my only rescue boat and you're in the water and you get into trouble, I want another rescue boat there as a backup, because anything can happen, right? You can spring a leak, it can tip over, your motor can die, someone can fall overboard. You have to have that other rescue boat in there. And obviously, they didn't have that plan. They used a personal boat, and things went bad.
Yeah, and the last thing that was noted by the coroner was a lack of firefighter training and equipment, which seems most evident when you read through the coroner's report. That's really where the focus of the coroner's report is. But there are all these other aspects that really were required to have been done properly before the incident even happened, and the coroner identified those, although did not go into great detail about them. Anyway, according to expert testimony, which is by somebody after the fact, by a marine rescue expert at the coroner's inquest, the rescuers would have had a better chance of reaching the homeowners needing rescue from the rising water if they had taken a circuitous route around the flooded field and along the tree line where it was shallower. This is what had been reportedly suggested to the firefighters earlier on, as Paul had related to you. The expert also stated that he would have chosen a more suitable craft like an inflatable boat, Zodiac. The attempt to cross the flooded field was doomed to failure based on the coroner's report because the route straight across the field was the deepest point of the water where the current was the fastest. The small 4 horsepower outboard did not have the power to move the ATV forward in the fast moving water. Also, the presence of the tracks on the wheels of the ATV made it even more unmanageable by creating an underwater sail effect and affecting the maneuverability. We don't know why they chose that path. There's no insight to that at all.
Yeah, he may have thought that the vehicle was more capable than it was, or he didn't think the stream was going as fast as it was. Lack of training
Yeah,
and knowledge and experience.
yeah, it certainly suggests that he was not really aware of the capabilities of the vehicle. But according to the amphibious vehicle manufacturer, which was Argo All-Terrain Vehicles, Canadian brand, I believe, actually.
Yeah, and they just bought Arctic Cat, the snowmobile company.
Right.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So, but the technical specifications for the Argo indicated that it had a cruising speed of 4 to 5 kilometers an hour in water. So it could move through water at 4 to 5 kilometers an hour. But in this incident, they were faced with a current that had been estimated at the time as approximately 18 kilometers per hour by the provincial police. So even if it was managing 5 kilometers an hour, the current was 13 kilometers an hour faster than the vehicle was capable. So there's only one way the vehicle was going, and that was whichever direction the current was flowing. In this case, it was flowing towards a bridge. It would have been impossible for this vehicle, even without the tracks, which slowed it down further, to withstand the current successfully. Plus, the boxy shape of the Argo, and if you've seen them, they're basically like a square
Just
bathtub.
so exactly. It
with,
is a bathtub
with
that you sit in.
with 6 tires off the side, 3 on
Mm-hmm.
each side. Anyway, the shape of it likely caused it to tip over in the current. So once it had a loss of stability, the edges and the wheels and plus the tracks would have easily caught and just caused it to upset. once it got sideways. So the boxy shape likely caused it to tip over, thereby throwing the firefighters into the water. Well, they would have been in the water for sure. Although the incident that involved this particular ATV, the ATV belonged to the senior firefighter's sister. It wasn't his. The one involved in the incident was actually very similar to his own. And why is that relevant? It's relevant because the senior firefighter had purchased his Argo secondhand. He hadn't bought it new, and had then not received any official training on its operational capabilities or limitations, which you would have typically expected from the dealer. Although that may be expecting too much. I don't know, but
Well, I mean, I've used Argos, and yeah, they are by no means a boat. They're an all-terrain vehicle that floats, and the 4 to 5 kilometers per hour. I would say that's on a great day with a excellently performing Argo with good tires. And the problem with an Argo, as soon as you put the brakes on one side, it causes RPM drop, because it's not clutches, it's just brakes, and therefore you lose RPM, and then it doesn't turn very well either. So it's the one deficiency of an Argo versus like a tank that has clutches, or a bulldozer that disengages one side and keeps the other side going.
Yeah. But the Argo is listed as an amphibious vehicle. It's not listed as a boat.
Right.
So according to this marine expert further, the vehicle was not suitable for that rescue attempt. The expert stated that probably the best approach would have been to wait for a helicopter rescue.
Yeah, the marine experts. I was just reading an article the other day. World War II, we're getting on the 85th anniversary or whatever here, and they had the duplex drive tanks because they would float. They had a skirt around them. They would float, but they didn't depend on the tracks for propulsion in the water. They had propellers, because tracked vehicles do not do well in water. Anyway,
that would be the 80th anniversary of VE Day.
80th, and they're doing a recreation of Dunkirk evacuation, which is 85th. With all the little boats are gathering in the UK to go across to Dunkirk in a commemorative event. It's been cool. I've been watching. Denny and I both have boating backgrounds or yachting backgrounds, and so I've been following that on Facebook. And anyway, it's interesting. Okay, squirrel. The marine expert opined that the firefighters, who were dressed in bunker gear, had no chance of survival once thrown into the water. Even if they had been wearing PFDs, the extreme current would have surely submerged them and swept them away. The expert concluded his report by stating that even if all good water rescue practices had been implemented and the decision to intervene had been taken with the best protective equipment like water rescue suits and stuff, and the best boat and the best techniques, the level of danger to the rescue was too great to ensure the safety of the responders on the water. I know they weighed how much the firefighters weighed with their gear, and the PFDs would not have kept them up. But even if they'd worn rescue gear and PFDs, the chance of surviving an 18-kilometer-an-hour river would be very low. I've done swiftwater rescue, and that's fast. And in a floodwaters, you never know what's in the water or what you're going to catch or what you're going to cook on. I mean, it's fatal.
And ice flows.
And ice flows, yep, which we talked about that a few months ago in a podcast.
Yep.
Further conclusion, the investigation considered the following: the lack of training in water safety and rescue, the lack of equipment suitable for the task, including PFDs and water safety equipment or boats, the use of an Argo as a boat. All of these factors were decisive in this incident, but not addressing them would ultimately not have changed the outcome had someone fallen into the water, as occurred. The correct course of action for a fire department without water rescue team should have been, as demonstrated in this case, to not intervene and to wait for helicopter rescue of the residents.
So anyway, in conclusion, the coroner's inquest concluded that the deaths occurred in the line of duty while working as part-time firefighters, and the Provincial Occupational Safety Commission therefore also investigated the incident. And their results or findings were as follows. There was a lack of planning for preventative measures for local flooding. So that's pointing at the municipality. And this is a local municipality and a regional municipality at the same time, right? So this lack led to a poor response management. So there was basically, they weren't prepared for this incident because they hadn't taken planning measures. There was a lack of training for firefighters assigned or tasked to carry out work near and above water. So the firefighters were operating near water, in this case, fast flowing water, and they weren't prepared for that. They weren't trained for it. Recommendations were made by the occupational safety and health people. Were made to the provincial firefighters training school regarding addressing near water operations in its firefighter training. In other words, to include that as a component of training, which we can assume was not prior to this incident. We don't know that, but that's what that suggests. The Occupational Safety Commission also further prohibited the Saint-Urbain firefighters from any future activities near a body of water without wearing PFDs, special training, and appropriate equipment. So that would include even drafting.
I
And,
guess.
and any department I've been in, and any provincial health and safety, I think you're within
10 feet or
is it
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like 3 meters from the water.
Mm-hmm.
You're
3
required to
meters.
be
Yep.
PFD or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
uh, so we always wore them for that reason. Well,
Yeah.
for the reason of not wanting to drown, that reason,
Right.
but also because it was regulation. And further concluded, the provincial occupational health and safety investigation concluded that particular attention needed to be paid to the risk associated with wearing bunker gear during floods. It's not suitable for water rescue operations.
Yeah, bunker gear is really weird when you're in the water because for the first few seconds it floats, like it lifts you up because it's trapped air in there. But once it soaks up the water, it is wearing a lead suit. It just takes you down.
Now, I just saw a video on, the authority of all things, Facebook, or it might have been
Yeah.
TikTok, of, of one firefighter teaching another firefighter how to stay afloat in the water in bunker gear.
Yeah.
And after I got over shaking my head about what were they doing in the water in their bunker gear in the first place without a PFD, they were showing them how to take their boots off and invert
Yeah.
them and convert them into, I don't know, a flotation device, and how to use
Oh,
their helmet
cool.
and how to use their helmet to trap air and use it as a flotation device.
Okay.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, probably a good thing to know, but you should never have to know it because you should be wearing a proper PFD and you shouldn't be in the water in your bunker gear in the first place. We've done a number of incidents on this podcast. We had one where a firefighter fell into a drain on the side of a highway because he was
Yep.
investigating, looking for a victim along a ditch line in a bad flood, fast
Yep.
moving water. All of these techniques are useless if the water isn't still.
Mm-hmm.
If the water is moving and you get dragged under a pier or dragged under a bridge, which was the case here in particular, or dragged under an ice flow, there's very little that's going to save you. You shouldn't be there in the first place. So that's really I think the message in your bunker gear. So
So, as a
so
result of
I look at these videos on the World Wide Web and think to myself, really?
Yeah. As a result of the coroner's report, many provincial, municipal, and firefighting organization recommendations were made. I didn't write it in here, but they actually recommended that the Bay St. Paul Fire Department regionalize with the villages around to make it one organization to better afford equipment, training, quicker response, communications, all that kind of stuff, which we're seeing a lot here in Alberta and Western Canada, regional fire departments to try to improve operations of these communities need to be protected, right? So how do we do it better? And one way potentially is to regionalize. As a result of the incident and the report, the city of Bay St. Paul has indicated that it intends to establish water rescue teams with appropriate training and equipment, and will support the region for future water rescue operations. So that maybe some good out of it, hopefully. But I mean, we did that one in the UK where they had kept their two rescue boats and they ran into each other, and then in the end they got rid of the one rescue boat, but they weren't doing it. It's so hard to get adequate training in these specialty skills.
But this incident, Paul, really, in my mind, emphasizes the fact that there are risks in your department or risks in your community that your fire department has decided either openly decided not to do something to be prepared for, or not to engage in those, or has just avoided making overt decisions as to whether they're going to participate. And then the incident happens, in this case, and other cases we talked about, like the drownings in Port Colborne and Point Edward, and the other drowning in Ontario we did in a podcast, where you're which was in training, but you're faced with this incident, and you've either decided not to do these incidents, so you haven't trained and equipped for them, or you've not made a decision at all and you're not trained and equipped to do them, and then you're faced with the incident, and now you're basically, people are standing around, the public, looking at you saying, aren't you going to do something?
Yeah.
And so now you're in a situation whereby you wish you had made a decision previously to be trained and equipped to do these particular types of incidents. And it can be really, really hard to do. And you got a fire department of 15 members, and they probably do very few calls in the run of a year, and they're all volunteers. And so the issue is that, do you be prepared for that, and do you train and do you equip? Do you be prepared to go to motor vehicle incidents? Are you prepared to go to confined space incidents? Are you prepared to go to trench collapse incidents? Are you prepared to go to structural collapse incidents? Are you prepared to do interior firefighting incidents?
Or high
It's
rise,
a,
high
it's a
rise, or high
long list.
rises, or yep.
Hazmats, or well, I don't think there's a lot of high rises in Saint-Urbain, but just saying,
No.
silos. Are you
Yeah.
prepared to do
Silos. Yeah.
silos,
Yeah.
and agricultural rescue? So all of these things, and at some point you got to draw a line and say, it's not a high risk in our community. It could happen. Yes, it could. And we need to be prepared for the ones, and we need to get the political backing and the funding, and the support of the membership to do the training and to be prepared for that. And what happens is in a lot of organizations, they fail to do that. They
I
fail
mean,
to recognize the need.
the key there, Denis, is, and it's happened in
Leadership.
BC. It's happening. It's happening in, well, the leadership. It's happening in Alberta to a certain extent, and other areas in North America, that decision makers need to make a clear policy as to what we're doing or what we're not doing. Because if it's up to the captain on the call, do we go rescue them or not? And no one's telling them you can't go rescue them. They're going to want to go rescue them. Hey, I'm a firefighter. I'm Superman. I've got a cape. I'll show it to you. Let's go. And we're going to do it. And they're going to do it for their neighbor anyway, even if they weren't members of the fire department. If the neighbor would have called them and said, hey, I'm stuck in my house, can you come get me? They probably would have went. But if policymakers make a decision saying we do not do water rescue, or we do not do whatever, I had to do this. We had a call. We had a car in a reservoir that was witnessed. The guy drove into the reservoir, traffic accident, and we get on scene, 40 minutes later, and our policy was we do water rescue, but surface only, nothing underwater. And the cops were there, and our firefighters were there. Well, we can see the car. Just let me go down there. I'll try to open a window. I'll try to go get the guy. And I told the cop right then and there, I was command. I said, we are not going under the water. I'll just hold on to your boat and I'll just kind of reach down. No, you won't, because I'm not going to be telling somebody that you died trying to rescue somebody that was probably already dead. So we have to, but if the policymakers haven't made those decisions, it's really hard for the guy on the spot to say, no, we can't do it. So that needs to
Yeah.
happen ahead of time.
Yeah. But also, fire departments should not try and fool themselves into thinking they can do something when really they're not able to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't man adequately to do structural firefighting, interior and rescue, then that's not what you do, and you don't do that until you have adequate support from your mutual aid partners or automatic aid partners or whatever, and it takes them time to get there.
Yeah.
So there's
Saint
specific
Saint
timelines.
St.
Yeah.
Thomas, Ontario.
Yeah,
There you go.
perfect example. Yeah,
Right?
short,
Not enough
short,
staffing.
short staffed. Yeah, exactly. There's areas
Multi-family
of this.
dwelling.
There's areas of this country where response times are quite long because they're rural and/or remote. You've got 15, 20 minutes response time with a fire truck. If there's a structural fire when you arrive, and there was somebody inside that fire, and you've got working fire blowing out the windows and/or fully involved, is there a realistic prospect of rescuing anybody? Your mutual aid is behind you because this is your district. So maybe in those decisions, in those departments, in those circumstances, you don't have an interior firefighting rescue fire department. You're more of a what we call surround and drown, but basically you're more
Exposure
of that.
protection.
Yeah, your defensive fire service is what you are.
Mhm.
So you just need to recognize that, and more importantly, your public needs to know that, because expectations will exceed your capabilities if you don't manage expectations.
Yeah, some of the counties or municipalities here in Alberta, I know personally, they put in their annual tax notice, about firefighting and stuff like that, and they say we expect exterior firefighting operations only. We will try to prevent the fire from going to other structures, but they try to educate the residents that we're not going to be able to go in and save you unless conditions are ideal. Anyway, we ramble on. Another good episode, and a Canadian episode, which is interesting. We will try to get this out, and we'll try to keep getting them out there. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast. The podcast is growing rapidly, a lot more people listening, and hopefully it's worthwhile, which is great. And we can find us on all the major things. And we're now on YouTube as well as a podcast. So you don't get to see our smiling old faces, but you get to listen to the same great content. So thank you very much. Follow us on our socials. And Denis, any last words for the audience?
Yeah, just be good and take care every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Let's be safe out there. Thanks a lot.